And we are live.
Yeah, nice. Hey.
Hey, how you doing, mate?
I'm all right, you?
Not bad, not bad. What's going
on? Just waiting for James to join us,
Mm-hmm.
and then we're all set, ready to go. Second live chat for the Pioneers.
Yep.
So we had Heather last time, James this time.
Mm-hmm.
Got a few more in the pipeline, I think. We've got Wendy
We are
coming up
live.
soon. Yeah, nice.
Oh.
Hey.
I've got a...
Hey,
how you doing, mate?
I'm all right, you?
We're getting...
Not
You're hearing
bad.
that? What's going on? Let me
Just
turn the
waiting for
sound
James
down
to
on
join
our
us.
own
Mhm.
feed.
And
Oh,
then
that's a bit
we'll-
weird. That's
we'll
just a
set,
few
ready to
seconds
go.
ago.
I'm a bit dizzy.
There you go.
That's
That's
better.
bad. That does get weird, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you hear what you said about 20 seconds ago.
I saw a thing on QI once, like if you
Not sure I
if
like
you
that.
play if you do that and you play it, it gets to a certain point where you can't talk anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it really.
I find
messes
it a
you
little.
up.
I find it a little bit when I'm making the videos. If I've gone ahead and I'm still writing that's gone. That's behind.
Yeah.
It gets really confusing. For
Yeah,
me.
like writing and trying to talk.
Yeah, because your speech goes way faster than you're writing. Well, it does for me anyway.
And you end up writing the thing you're currently saying instead of what you should have been writing.
I find when I'm writing that what happens is that I'm writing the sentence that I should be sort of from the past, but a word from the present just pops in there,
Yeah,
or even a partial spelling from the present
yeah.
pops in there, which is quite problematic.
Yeah.
Because
People watching like, what's he doing?
it depends what you're writing, really, because there's a couple of really questionable. When I look back at the videos, I see loads of times where there's a little typo. It's not a typo, a little spelling mistake, and it's not my spelling actually isn't the greatest ever, but it's not that I've spelled it wrongly. It's that I'm mixing together more than one word.
Yeah, because you're talking a different time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing. Anyway, let me have a little look while see if he's here. I think he's on.
Yeah.
Let me send him a message. You tell us what we're doing, Mike, because you're on at the moment.
So what we're doing, we're just going to talk to James. Really, we'd really like to. Basically, it started from us having kind of quite interesting conversations in the office, didn't it? And he's online.
He's online, bless him.
Yeah, so we had interesting conversations, and we kind of said, well, we should broadcast this because it's interesting, and people might be bored and want to watch it. I want to listen to what we're talking about in the office. And then it just developed from there. So when we set up the Pioneers group, it was a good chance to get other people involved in the conversation. So
yeah,
here we are, second one with James.
I like that people might watch this because they're bored. That's kind of the sum of entertainment, really, isn't it? Why? Yeah. Anyway,
what would you have to have on offer to not want to watch us? There's not a lot. Let's be fair.
What are you watching at the moment these days?
What, on telly?
Yeah, you watch much.
Well, Bake Off's finished, isn't it?
I'm not into that.
No,
my kids absolutely love it, but I'm not.
Yeah,
not really
I did get into it, and then we missed the final, and then Hannah caught up on it last night. I didn't watch it. I just found out who won.
Am I right in? I might have had the wrong person on the camera there. Am I right in understanding it was?
Oh, spoiler alert.
Okay, but am I not supposed to say?
Who? No, I don't think it was.
It's not a
No.
Female. From Liverpool. From Liverpool.
We can spoil it. It's been on it was like a week ago. We can spoil now, surely.
I don't know when it was.
What's her name? I can't even remember her name.
Is it Rebecca?
Maybe. I don't know.
I might have made that. I may have made that up. Yeah, I may have made that up. To be fair, so I'm not totally sure.
I thought it began with S. Sophie.
Sophie.
Yeah.
No,
maybe not.
I didn't even know there's anyone called Sophie in it.
I don't know.
Well, as spoilers go, we haven't spoiled particularly efficiently.
Yeah.
Right, let me see. So James seems to be ready. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call James up here.
Yeah, Sophie it was.
And let's see if I can bring him into the call. See if he can answer. We've got a nice sound as if we're ringing him. James.
Hello.
Hi, mate.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you see me, or does that not matter?
We would like to see you because we've got a camera all set to see you, James. So we if it's possible, we're going to insist to see you because first of all, I've met you and you are dramatically handsome. So you do need to go on to here. But secondly, yeah, it'll help anyone that views this later. It will help them if they can see you really. So ideally, if you can, that would be great. Are you on your phone or are you on a computer?
No, I'm on the computer, but I'm just double checking it because it's an older one. I'm just trying to see with the camera thing's working. If not, I've got a backup laptop here which we can switch to if needs be.
Okay, understood. So at the moment we can't see you, but But no
Okay,
pressure.
give me
But no
give me
pressure,
2
mate.
seconds.
We're only live online. You're all right. So while
I'll see if
James,
I can, I'll
sorry.
see if I can get set up on another laptop, which is
All right, James. Well, I'll ring off the Skype call, and then if you try with that one, then we'll go from there.
cool.
All right. Speak in a sec. So that's James.
There he was. Hope you enjoyed that, everyone.
Yeah, that's yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll get it sorted out.
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll get it sorted out. And
sure.
yeah, I mean, give us a bit of an introduction to him, because you've been in his classroom at least once.
So, well, we were at university at the same time, so I kind of knew him there. Although we didn't know each other that well, but just kind of knew of each other, I guess. And then we worked fairly closely with Itchen, and they helped us to develop the roadmap. We tested it out there, so we worked with him quite a lot there. And then he was keen to get involved in this project and become a pioneer. So so he's been working with us on that. He's been part of the group and quite active on the Facebook group. So he's kind of a key player in it at the moment. And so I sat in his classroom to talk about something different, but obviously I was just there for the.
We can't divulge what that is at this point.
Secret
That is a secret.
X.
Yeah.
But I was part of the classroom when he was doing this model. It's kind of weird. Maybe I should probably wait till he's on the call, but it's kind of weird. I remember coming back and I was at home. We called after. I called you after, and said something along the lines of, "It was really good, but I don't know why. I don't know what was so good about it."
He's going to love that.
Yeah, it was just like it was really good, but it didn't. You couldn't like look down it like with a normal lesson observation tick list and tick off like, oh yeah, good activity there, or good observation, good differentiation there, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just subtle, and it's just. It was a really nice environment to be in. Everyone was really relaxed. Everyone was really calm. And you kind of summed it up. You're like, yeah, everyone's just learning.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, how weird for a classroom. But yeah, it was just like a really nice environment where everyone was just getting on with their jobs at their own rate, and people have a little conversation and they get on with a bit more work, and it's just pleasant, you know.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think real quality lessons probably don't fit too neatly into a lesson observation sheet. I think that's probably fair to say.
It'd be a nice challenge, I think, to try and design a lesson observation sheet suitable for a self-paced classroom.
I've thought about doing it. I have a vague structure in my mind, but I get a little bit nervous about things like that, because things like documents like that become very close to policies. Yeah, and a policy is, broadly speaking, trying to it's trying to be a rule where there's no solution, and I think it would only be partially successful. I think ultimately what you would, I think what's much more important is to listen to the learners and to look at the volatile data. For me, that's much more relevant than the lesson was this standard because it fitted into this set of characteristics.
And to be fair to Ofsted, they're not asking for that either now. They don't have every lesson must contain these 7 things.
The old magnificent 7.
Yeah, they don't have that. So it's kind of unfair of us to suggest that that's the alternative, because they're not even asking for that. There's lots of schools that do still ask for that, and I guess they do it out of a consistency thing, trying to get consistency across lessons. But we're not really up against that, I don't think, because Ofsted aren't asking for that.
No.
Or the equivalent. I don't know about ISI, but Ofsted aren't. But it'd be interesting to see what would be in that kind of, because ultimately, if let's say everyone took this on and everyone was doing it, you would still need a way to assess the quality.
Of course.
And data and the student feedback, I guess, would be the first place to go for that.
For me, that would be much more relevant, because the only thing that should be, if you assume safeguarding and things like that for a second, and I don't mean to undermine those concepts, because clearly they're important, but let's just assume that they're good. The only measure of value is learning. Yeah. That is the only thing of value, in my opinion. I'm going to say something that will come across controversial, and I want to be clear here. I'm only speaking as James here. I'm not speaking as my PE exam or the EverLearner or anything. I'm just about me and the teaching career I had for a decade and a half or so. I don't care what Ofsted thinks, bluntly. Yeah. I'm not interested. If they've got something to offer, if they've published something interesting and I can learn from it, or that I can develop from it, then I'm interested. But if it's just, this is the standards we all must follow, I'd rather set my own
my
standards.
impression is they're moving away from that to being more about.
I think that's
outcome.
reassuring.
And I think it's good. I think generally it's a good thing. There's a lot of what's the word? I don't know. There's a lot of negative feelings historically, so it's really difficult. Even if let's say they even became like a really helpful organisation, even then they would find it really difficult to get people on side because historically they haven't been helpful. So they'd have a big job to change their reputation in a way.
I think they haven't been helpful, but purely from the perspective that they have operated from a base position of quality assurance and scrutinization through the eyes of a system which doesn't match the way in which human beings actually learn. They're the epitome of the industrial model checkpoint.
And they're only taking orders from somebody else, aren't they? Ultimately, they're the.
Are they? Or are they not? Are they not a representation of the dominant value system? Is that not what they are? I mean,
Probably.
because if you accept for a second that the industrial model is the predominant standpoint and viewpoint of the educational system, then Ofsted is inevitable in that framework. Sooner or later, you get to Ofsted or Ofsted by any other name with slightly different criteria, slightly different protocols, whatever. You ultimately get to that point. So for me, they're the realization of that model and that value system. So I don't have any problems. I don't have any problems with Ofsted personally. I'm just not that interested. Professionally, I'm interested because I have to be, and I'm very aware of their work. But just on an educator's level, I'm not that interested.
Yeah. I think most people will probably be similar.
Yeah,
most people probably aren't. There has to be some sort of accountability. It probably doesn't have to come from a central organisation like that. But I think most people probably are of a similar opinion that you have to do certain things if they're asking for that, and you're going to be judged upon it. But ultimately, once they've gone, you're going to go back to how you want to teach your class. And hopefully people have a professional and moral standpoint that they're working from. That means they're going to do good things anyway.
I mean, I probably shouldn't say these things on this type of broadcast because ultimately I'm at work and I have to represent our business and all that stuff. But I've always been 10 times more interested in what the people in my classroom daily are interested in my teaching than someone.
Of course, yeah.
I can't get excited about it on a personal level. I repeat, if there's a nugget in there that makes me think and challenges me, great, and I would like to think that a critical friend could do that. I think that's been sparse in the past through Ofsted. I think it's been limited. I don't want to be too harsh because I haven't got everyone's experiences. I'm sure some people have been facilitated through the Ofsted experience. I'm sure, but for me personally, it's just not something that means a great deal to me on a personal level or an educator's level. I repeat again, on the professional level, addressing those points and supporting teachers to address those points is very, very important. Yeah, like that Project X is a great example of that. How unbelievably effective.
But that interestingly has come from nowhere near that point, nowhere near the kind of like, what does Ofsted want? Let's build something for that. It's just come from what would help the teachers and students. And obviously that's the same thing Ofsted are looking for. Yeah. So they're going to like it. And I guess that's what most teachers do, right? They do right by the students, and Ofsted should like that.
Yeah. And I think it's not. It is right by the students, but I think it's a bit. It depends what that means, doesn't it? I suppose. I think having a really aspirational view for those students and all people, if you hold that and that's the approach you take as the educator, then I'm sure Ofsted would recognise that really effectively within the model. I mean, it's definitely less stringent than it was before. It's definitely less directive than it was before. But I do find that these things are cyclical, so I wouldn't necessarily assume that is a long-term setting. That may well change.
Yeah, maybe.
Let's see. I got a message from James a moment ago. He said, "Sorry, mate, give me 2 minutes. The other laptop is being useless." So I'm not sure how he's going to solve it.
He'll be on in a minute.
He'll be on in a minute, but we're fine.
So what would you look for if you're in a school looking at this classroom model? What would you look for? You look at the data.
Yeah. And I think we've got to be clear about what we mean by that data. We're not talking about data as in end of unit tests or mock exam results or predicted grades. Those would all be there as well, but they would make themselves. They would produce themselves. I think it would be the day-to-day volatile data trends that would be emerging from the classroom, and I would be literally listening to students constantly.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, right? If you go into a classroom and you speak to a student, you speak to a number of students, and they all know the same thing the teacher knows. Not content-wise, but they understand their learning process in the same way or better than the teacher does. You can't not be impressed by that.
Yeah.
You know, if they can go, right, these are the topic, this is what we're studying at the moment. These are the parts of that topic that I am struggling on. These are the bits I've already mastered. Here's the evidence of that, not from an Ofsted perspective, but here's my work that I've done. And now I'm working on this thing, and I've been struggling on it for a while, but I've got help from so and so and so and so, and I'm getting there. Like, wow, what's not to like about that? That's outstanding, surely.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's probably hard for people to hear this conversation without the yeah but factor, because we live in the institutionalized world of schools and colleges, and we've all been indoctrinated into those protocols. But I think you have to experience this, a bit like you were saying with James's lesson that you were there. I think you've got to go and experience that and feel what that's like, to see all people concentrating at a rhythm that is right for them. And those of us that have worked in those classrooms know how effective that is. Right, I think we've got James. So let's give him a try. So I'm gonna ring. I'm gonna bring him in, just see if we got him. We've got some. We haven't got a
blip.
We've got a blip rather than a ringtone.
Sounds like a leak.
Yeah, this is not
doing anything for my bladder.
Neither we.
I will do if this dripping goes on any longer.
Well, that's not getting through to him. I'm going to ask him to ring us. Come on, James. You can do it. So, James, you call us, please. And then we'll see what happens. Yeah. So, yeah. So you're not good on the bladder, are you? I've noticed this.
I remember when we were on tour, I needed a wee while we were driving. You said, "You're a leaky little fella, aren't you?"
I don't remember that. Oh, the tour. Yeah. It seems a long time ago.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
So that was the second time I met James.
Yeah. Yeah, we met him at the school, didn't we?
Once at Itchen. That was before the tour, wasn't
it? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then they all came, didn't they? Most of their team came.
So I'm trying to remember everyone's name down there. I know Glenn. I know James.
Matt was the biomechanics whiz.
That's right. Oh yeah, Matt, who
with the goatee.
What was his sport? Was he martial artist? High jump.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, he was high jump.
He was. And then, he loved that. He really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was good.
He was a nice guy.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. And
I can't remember.
What was her name?
I don't know. I want to say Sarah, but that's probably not Sarah.
Could be.
I think I'm just thinking of the Bake Off.
Back to that. Well, James is outright having a nightmare here. He's all Skyped out. What's going on there?
Sorry about this, mate. Can you? That's it.
So what you finished on? Can you? Sometimes.
Can I have your email so I can try another way? Yeah.
What's he going to do? He's going to try and... Well, all I'm going to say is I'm happy. I'm here. I'm warm.
I've got a little glass of Coke.
I'm slightly clammy, if anything. I've got very cold water on the go, so I'm happy about that. But we've got no James, which is
sad.
Can't
be helped, eh?
Mike, tell us a little bit about the EverLearner Pioneers group, which James is a part of. Just give us a
bit.
Yeah,
we've got about. I think we've got 18 people now in the group. So the Pioneers was set up because after the summer holidays, people came back, fired up to do this classroom model. Especially after the tour happened just before the summer holidays. Where was it? June or July?
First week of July.
First week of July. Yeah. So people went away, and lots of people spent some of their summer holiday, or all of it, from some people. Planning loads of work for students to work through in this model. So in the first couple of weeks back after schools went back after summer, we started getting some calls from people saying, "Oh, I've tried it." Got emails saying, "I've had a go. Here's what I found." Blah blah blah. So at that point, it was like, well, we need to capitalize on that, and because in my mind, people would have planned a certain amount. I don't think anybody would have planned for an entire year's worth of work. It would have been mental. So they would have planned a certain amount, and what I didn't want to happen was they do that, have a good experience, but then every day school life gets in the way and they didn't have the time again to plan the next part. So I just wanted to kind of strike while the iron was hot and capitalize on that
and
positive
support
motivation
people as well, right?
Yeah, and then as part of that positive kind of like keeping people fired up was the fact they were going to put in touch with other people who were doing the same thing, and having the same experiences or different experiences they can learn from. So we kind of said, well, most people are on Facebook. Let's get a Facebook group. You can easily share things. Don't have the limit that Twitter has on characters. So kind of a better conversation. And yeah, we set that up, and then people it's been really active. You know, it's been really, really nice to see people like posting things about what they've got coming up, what they have done, experiences they've had. Sorry, I'm just looking at James.
Yeah, I've been massively impressed with how much activity there's been through those pages.
Yeah, people are really excited about it.
And it's really intriguing conversation.
It's quality as well. It's really high quality conversation.
The quality is phenomenal. And one of the things that, and again, we sort of hope to be able to support this as well from this perspective of having this kind of crazy TV studio as well. One of the things we'd like to be able to do is elevate the conversation for people. Now, I'm not sure a good example of that right now, but in general, bringing conversations to people that are relevant, and that EverLearner Pioneer Group is a magnificent example of that.
And hopefully as we get more and more people involved in this movement and more people join that, then we're going to notice that people closer together in terms of their geography can start to not just link up through the Facebook group, but in person as well, go and see each other's classrooms. So I think that as the network grows, it's going to be kind of more.
And when you think about the number, you said there 18 people. It doesn't feel like it's like everybody or tons of people or things like that. But if you just think about that for a second, that's 18 PE teachers who in their classroom on a regular basis are running self-paced classrooms in a model which is close to the model that very similar or exactly the model that we advocate. And that's a lot. Because once that ball starts rolling, it's very difficult to stop that and to turn back and go back to the old way. I would estimate that 3/4 to all of the people who have started this journey will continue to some degree on this journey, and that will spread to others as well.
And if they don't, I don't think it will be their choice not to.
I agree.
It will be maybe somebody's not forcing them; they've got to do it another way. But just things will get in the way that stop them from doing this.
Yeah.
And I think as more and more people do it, people will just. It will just be like the iPhone. It's like, well, how come we didn't always have this thing?
Yeah.
You know, why hasn't this just been the norm for however long?
We are a bit like the iPhone.
Yeah, I think so.
Sleek. Slim.
Mine's broken.
What's that word? It's nice to hold. What do you call that? Not tactile. No, ergonomic. That was the word I was looking for. I like to think of myself as ergonomic.
I think I'm more squishy at the moment.
Squishy.
Yeah.
I've got lots of bits hanging. Not
in
a good way.
We're nothing like the iPhone, are we?
No, not really.
I think I'm more like a Nokia.
8210.
Hi, mate. No, it's fine.
So Mike's having a chat and to James, see what's going on.
Okay.
We could put his audio on his phone.
Yeah. So if you try and give him a call now. Do you want to stay on the phone, mate, just in case?
On the Skype?
Yeah, call him on Skype.
Let's have a look. Let's see what happens. It's not ringing, it's blipping. Ah, we have a ring. The drama. Is he going to answer it? Hey! James?
Yeah. I'm going to hang up on this phone so we know which one you're coming through.
No, that hasn't worked. I'll ring him back.
That hasn't worked.
The entertainment value here is it's magnificent. Let's see what happens. Otherwise, pub.
Yeah.
I think that's the only thing left, really. James.
Again.
Yeah, that's not working.
Do you want to try? We can put the audio on this phone.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. Yeah, happy with that? So we'll just have you on speaker. Oh no, I don't know how it's gonna work. I'm gonna plug my phone in.
But he's gonna hear us through your speaker on your phone. So you're gonna have to put that in the middle.
Okay, yeah. Try one last time, mate. He's gonna hear us through the speaker.
through the speaker. He's going to hear us through the phone. Does he want me to call him on Skype again?
Do you want James to call? Yeah, give him a call.
Okay, we haven't got the blipping this time because we've disconnected the audio from Skype. Let's see if we can get him first of all. Can you just pass me that back over so we can hear him? Come on, James. James.
I can see you. I can hear you.
Ah, we can hear you now. You're getting decent sound from us, are you?
Oh, there we go. Is that right?
We can hear you well. I just don't know are you getting decent sound back from us?
Yeah, I can hear you well. Yeah.
What we haven't got of you is a picture, James, because yours is whirring. What I would recommend you do. I told you he was dramatically handsome. He
is a good-looking chap.
I know, it annoys me.
Yeah.
It really annoys me.
Turn the picture off.
Yeah, let's put it back up. But what we'll do is let's first of all let's let the world see James first of all. Here he is. I don't know how to describe this setting that you're in, James. Where are you? Are you in prison?
I can't see you, mate.
Yeah, it's
yeah, I mean,
but just to confirm, you've got decent sound from us, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
okay, James. What I'm going to do as well, James, I'm gonna show you what you're going to see on the screen now. Presumably, you can see double of yourself. Is that right?
Yeah, bottom corner, yeah.
Okay, but on your main screen now, can you sort of see double of yourself?
I see myself. I see you, and something else is loading. Oh yeah, double.
Okay, so what's going to happen here, James, is that whatever you see on that right-hand side when you look at the screen is what the audience can see. Okay, so at the moment the audience is looking at me at the moment. Now they're looking at Mike, for example. And if when you're speaking, you'll see that they're gonna see you like that.
Yeah.
All right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, I'm gonna get young Michael back on, and I'll let him introduce things.
How are you, mate?
Cool. Yeah, all good.
Yeah?
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Don't worry. We had a nice chat before.
We did. You're gonna have to catch up on it later.
Yeah. So we were just talking, mate, about when I came down to Itchen and sat in your class. Well, I wasn't obviously there to see the classroom, but I, by the way, I can't actually see you, mate. Not because there's anything wrong, but just because it's on a different screen. So I'm kind of just looking into the ether, and if I look in the camera, I think it seems like I'm looking at you. I can't see you, but I think it seems like I'm looking at you. Anyway, so if you pull any faces or show us anything, then I can't see it. So I'll just imagine.
I can.
James can. Anyway. So when I came to Itchen, and I wasn't there to see your classroom as such, but the classroom was going on as I was there. When I came back, and I spoke to James after, I was just saying that it was really good, but I couldn't pinpoint anything that was so good about it. Do you know what I mean? It's like when you go to a normal lesson, you can have a little observation sheet or something. You can say this element was good, this element was good, and it's like it's a real compliment, by the way. But there was nothing stand out that was so good, because it just felt like everything was right. It just fell into place. So what I mean is everyone was just learning stuff, and you look around and everyone seems like they're in a good place, and it's a positive atmosphere, and everything just seems like it's working like clockwork. And you as the teacher, I'm sure you're never like that kind of stressful teacher, but you were just calm and going around helping students as they needed it. They were coming up to you. It was, you know what I mean? Everything just kind of fell into place. It was really nice. Do you feel that as the teacher?
Yeah, I think I think it runs pretty smoothly once you set it up. It does. It runs very smoothly, and it gives you that chance to sort of step back, have a look in the classroom and see exactly who needs support, who's working well, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas you stood at the front just giving instructions the whole time, it doesn't allow you to see what sort of progress they're making. And I think we had that discussion before about they could just be doodling anything in their notepads or writing nothing. And so the fact that you can actually get around the room, and pinpoint who needs that extra support is really, really useful.
James, could you do us a favour? Could you give us what would be a quick guide to your classroom as it is now, And just introduce anyone that happens upon this to kind of broadly speaking what you're doing as a standard experience in your classroom at the moment. What's that like?
Yeah, so I've got two A-level groups. One that Mike observed is quite a small room. As you come in, you've got your sort of teaching space at the front. The next sort of area I've actually set up, and it's slightly different. I've got a sort of exam question area, and I've put that there because I've attached the roadmaps to the wall, so it's in the sort of eye line of the students whilst they're doing exam questions.
Mm-hmm.
Often have the PlayStation in behind that.
Did you say a PlayStation? Do you mean a game console?
PlayStation or Play Space, yeah.
All the students love the PlayStation area.
Terminal space goes along the classroom. We're lucky in the fact that we've got 20 computers in there, but we use the ones along the right-hand side, so there's about 10, 11 computers. Mm-hmm. And then at the back, we've got the sort of quiet study space where students can do worksheets or sort of any other tasks that we set, where they might bounce ideas off each other, but generally it's a little bit quieter.
And how long have you been doing? How long has it actually been like that? So the transition started when, and how far into that transition do you sort of see yourself?
Yeah, so I gave it a go actually in their first double lesson. So I see each A-level group for a single period on Tuesday, and then I see one group for a double on a Wednesday and the other group for a double on a Thursday. So we pretty much started straight away so that they got into the swing of things, because it does take time to develop. It's not straightforward, but I was actually surprised by how quickly they sort of got on with it and engaged with the process. It's actually started quite smoothly.
You've got quite an interesting method, James, that you've used, or you're in the process of using, for introducing this. So we kind of outlined two methods when we first launched this, which was, one would be to kind of take a couple of weeks worth of work and try and get everything ready for that couple of weeks, resource it all really well, and then go and deliver for that couple of week block. The other method we suggested was to take like some sort of after school or before school revision session or top up, catch up type session, where it's maybe less pressured, and try it there. But you've kind of got a slightly different version of that, where correct me if I'm wrong, but you just did it one lesson at a time to start with.
Correct, yeah, that's right. So we started, and I think that might have been maybe more of a control sort of issue with myself. So we started by having a target sheet for just that double lesson, which obviously takes out a little bit of the sort of student's self-pacing element of that, but actually it worked quite well. From that now, we're starting to build up to looking at topic areas which expand over sort of 2 to 3 weeks. So we're starting having sort of like a finish or a deadline day to have all those core targets completed on.
Yeah, it's a really nice method of doing it, I think, James, because like you say, the control is often the scary part.
Yeah.
You know, teachers not wanting to or not feeling comfortable relinquishing that control over to the students, especially if they've got a certain type of group of students, or there's a feeling of they won't be able to cope with that much freedom or whatever. And that's not a criticism of any other teacher. It's just the way it is at the moment. And I guess your method of doing that has allowed you to introduce it really gradually, and you gently give away the control to the students. I really like it. It's a really good method.
It's now sort of developing that into, opening it right up to, like we said, maybe 2 or 3 weeks where they've got a bigger sort of target sheet with more core targets, different extension targets, but they can now, if you do have those students that are finishing, they can have top targets, so they can set themselves targets, which is really good to challenge the more able students as well within that time.
And what would you say would be kind of a typical, what would be an average core target, James? I mean, how would that be written? What would that be like for a student?
Yeah, so I got one of the target sheets in front actually, and they're actually vastly different to what you guys, what we saw what we used, when we're up at, was it Worthing College, when we're up there for the CPD. So they're different, but it is very much watch the MyP exam tutorial, master fibre types, master the MyP exam quiz, complete exam questions, and then make reference to which questions they need to answer. So you can differentiate the questions, complete worksheet 1, complete worksheet 2, complete the activities at the play space. So it's pretty straightforward, and sometimes we'll leave instructions there for them to use to explain what's going on at the play space. But they've got very used to seeing a target and going, right, I need to move to this area to do this sort of task.
One of the things I don't know how you say that, Mike, but one of the things I really like about those targets is that apart from sort of the video and the online quiz stuff that obviously we've helped out a little bit with, it's bog stand. This is not meant in any way cheekily, James, by the way, but it's what you might loosely call bog standard classroom resources: questions, worksheets, activities. What I like about it, which I think is really exciting, is that what appears to be the case, at least, is that you've taken the delivery teaching bit, and that is available differently, or it's available in that tutorial sense, and now the students have got access to you. I mean, how much time are you spending with students, would you argue?
Well, I'd like to think that it's actually quite straightforward to speak to and do some of the work of every student in the lesson.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, James. Forgive me. Are you saying that you speak to students every lesson?
Oh, 100%. I can circulate the room and speak to every student at least a couple of times in there, and maybe have a look at what they're actually producing, as well as spending a little bit more time with those students that need that extra support. And again, compared to the normal classroom or the traditional classroom, you wouldn't get that opportunity to actually give feedback or speak to or have that conversation with every student.
Yeah, and when I came into your classroom, James, that I wasn't there to speak to the students about the classroom model in particular, but I couldn't help but ask it some questions about it. And the thing they all said they liked about it was exactly that they had access to you all the time. That was just consistent across every single. They came in kind of 2s or 3s to speak to me, and all of them. That was the first thing they said they liked about it, was that you're available to help. I mean, it just speaks volumes, really.
And that's a really great compliment as well, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I think the students appreciate that, especially when some of the content's quite difficult. Having that one-to-one feedback is more important than just generic feedback that you might get as you go through it. Okay, we're all making a similar mistake, let's have a look at this. They're actually getting an extra support or extra challenge or extension if they need it as well.
Well, I think it all makes common sense to us if we think about when the messages have the biggest impact. We know that if it's a personal, we could go into sort of kind of psychological theory stuff here, but we know that if messages are personalized, then they're going to be much more impacting for the recipient than if they're generic. I mean, there's nothing surprising in that. All we're talking about here, James, what you're doing is you've got a structure in place which makes that, as long as the teacher is engaged, it makes that inevitable. It's the default. That is by its nature what happens, and I think that's really interesting, because I think what happens a lot of the times in classrooms, of course, there's different standards that teachers perform at, and sometimes teachers do a great job, sometimes less so, and we all know examples of us. I can think some shocking lessons that I've had in my career. But I think what's interesting about this is that the structure itself lends itself, or it forces certain behaviours and processes which will inevitably cause more success, more learning, and actually probably, I mean, this was my experience, I guess, more enjoyment on the part of the learners and the teacher as well.
Yeah, I mean, I must note that's something that the students have actually said, is that they quite enjoy the fact that they can, go and do whichever activity they like. They actually enjoy the lesson, which is not always something that you hear from students. But students come in and go, "Oh, we're doing one of these lessons today." traditional lesson. So that's something nice you hear when the students are sort of waiting outside to then pick up their target sheet. So like we said, it's that enjoyment, but also some of the ideas you were mentioning there about things like resilience, the independence or the communication they're having with other people in the same area is just unlike what you'd have in perhaps a more traditional sort of environment.
Yeah, are you finding much that students teach one another?
Oh, 100%. And in fact, I was speaking to Mike about the learning walk that I had yesterday, and it was brilliant to see. Without being prompted by myself, you've got students that are on the sort of quiet study space, sort of just nudging each other and going, what have you got for this answer? And they actually then take it upon themselves to teach. And obviously, we don't need to go into all the stats, but we know that if a student's going to teach something to another student, then they're going to remember or recall a lot more of that information than just being told it.
So who came round to see it, James?
We had Andy, who you've met in the department.
Yeah. Andy, I'm trying to remember Andy's surname. I've known Andy for years. I always forget his surname.
Andy Ball, yeah.
Yeah, Andy Ball. I've probably known. I'm not exaggerating here because I don't know how old Andy is. He's younger than me anyway. I know that, but I think I knew Andy as an NQT teacher. I think I had my first fixture against him. He was probably 21, 22 years old at the time. Anyway, just as an aside.
Yeah. So Andy, who's our sort of quality nominee, and he invited in 5. I think they were sort of similar roles to what Andy's doing, so like the Ofsted nominee or the quality nominee from local secondary schools. They were just walking around the room asking the students about what they're doing, how they enjoy it, why is it slightly different. Andy actually put a bit of context into the environment that they were going to expect. So I think that helped. But it had some really positive feedback from the teachers.
Tell us.
Yeah, so I think that the number one thing that Andy and the teachers mentioned was the student engagement, which is key, and I'd like to think that's really, really high during all of those future classroom environments where someone walks in and they see students working here, students teaching or helping each other, students finishing a task, picking themselves up, moving on to the next one. The engagement levels are really, really high, and that's again something you don't see in that traditional classroom. And you end up seeing students throwing pens at each other because they're bored or they're not actually engaged in the lesson. So number one thing was the engagement. Number two was the variety of the tasks. I guess at a simple level, they were liking the fact that there were tutorials, there were quizzes, there were hands-on activities, there were games where they were talking and discussing, there were exam questions, and there were worksheets where they were working perhaps more independently. And they've got their folders in front, they're using their resources in their folders, so they like the variety of the resources and the tasks.
Wow,
that's cool.
They like the number three, they like the sort of differentiation. I think they noticed that not all the students had the same target sheet. It's something quite straightforward once you get your head around it's a plan. It's a visible straight away. If an inspector was in the classroom, they would see that student A has got a different target sheet to student B. And some students can have more extension targets than others. So obviously that ticks that differentiation box straight away.
Yeah, and again, it's that the model itself is differentiated rather than having a model where we have to kind of bolt on differentiation to make it look like the model is differentiated. In this model, your differentiation is intrinsic to the model. And I don't know if I've missed what you just said there. I think you said it's easy. In terms of the targets, it's pretty quick to produce the targets.
Yeah, pretty quick. And again, I think once you get your head around the planning aspect of it, it starts to become a little bit quicker to organise different target sheets, or maybe target a certain number of students with a certain target sheet. Like I said, to begin with, I was looking at target sheets for just a double lesson,
Yeah.
Those targets, could have been very different. Like we said, a group of students that did very poorly in their initial assessment to those students that did very well in their initial assessment. So you could sort of group those target sheets very differently.
Yeah.
How's the planning different, James? To say a
Planning,
traditional, what you were doing before, or what you do in your lessons which aren't like this?
I'm actually, I need to think about my words carefully. I'm actually enjoying aspects of the planning in terms of I sit at home and it's making me think the creativity, side of things and what we're doing in worksheets and what's going to happen at the play space. And it's quite exciting. I spend a Tuesday evening going through some of the activities and set myself up for the Wednesday and Thursday lessons. I quite enjoy coming up with some of these tasks that they're doing as their core targets.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I guess having that play space forces us to be a bit more creative in terms of what we're going to do. There's been quite a discussion on the Facebook group about it's quite difficult sometimes to come up with those activities. I mean, we didn't deliberately choose biomechanics because it was easy for that, but we had lots of activities for that because it lends itself to that type of work. But when you start getting into the sociocultural or the psychological things, it's a bit more difficult. Yeah. So it does challenge the creativity to come up with those things, and it is exciting to try and do that.
One of the things that I would say, and we've had it numerous times here in the office where we've spoken about this and been working on this, is that when you have that play space as an intrinsic part of the classroom, or when you're developing worksheets for intuition, for example, because you want potentially the worksheet to be the first exposure the student might have to a piece of learning, is that you have to render the topic or the skill down to its core nature, to its first principle, and build from there. So that's the thing that I think is really interesting, is that you build resources which are built up from the core experience of learning that content or that skill. And it can be a disorienting experience when you first do it, because normally we're used to writing problem sets or worksheets to fill this gap in or fill this table or complete this or that. And these are different because they're trying to get to the core of the center of the material.
Yeah, and I think, like we said, they can be quite varied. I can remember up at Worthing there were things that were perhaps unexpected to see in the classroom. That we had different rocks and we're trying to build it, and we're looking at stability and biomechanics. There's things like that I think the students can appreciate a lot more than just seeing something on the screen or telling them about stability. Them actually getting out their chairs or working with a partner to actually achieve something. I've had them cutting jelly babies to show planes of movements, that sort of thing. They absolutely love that. And that showed in their initial assessment where they all aced the question on planes of movement.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a coincidence, but they all answered that particularly strong.
Yeah, well, I think
very good.
It goes deeper than just being more enjoyable, doesn't it? It's not like the play space is just more fun. We were talking about this the other day. Like, if you have that continuum, that spectrum from like rote learning at one end up to whatever would be the highest echelons of learning, if it was Bloom's, then some sort of creativity or evaluation or analysis or something like that, then we tend to find most people down this end in terms of what can I put on my PowerPoint, what can I get students to copy, what can they be writing in their textbook, and what you've just described in your process of planning is actually you're thinking less about that and more about up here, like what can be in the play space, what can be in the quiet study space that's really going to drive that message home.
Yeah.
It's really nice that just as almost a byproduct of the model that we start to find the shift going up towards the the higher order or the higher taxonomy. Or
I think what's interesting about that is that, again, we've got a situation where I don't like using that term too much, but we've had a tendency in education where education deals with that rote learning, facts, figures, formulae, dates, this kind of thing, and education is very good at drilling those in to students, and we do tend to ignore that which is more we do tend to have too little time for that which is more elevated or more intuitive, more divergent, these sorts of ideas. I'm not trying to talk about Bloom's here, I'm just talking about sort of experience, but and I think what this model does is because everybody moves at their own pace, it enables people to go further into that material to the point that's relevant to them or a group of people, or that the situation or the time or the length left in the course allows. And that, of course, is a much more intuitive type experience. And that's valuable. I mean, that's extremely valuable.
It's also not. This is going to sound like an advert for the site. It's not meant to be at all. But all of that lower order stuff,
you can do that.
All of that lower order stuff is done.
Yeah.
The quizzes, rapid fire questions, just drilling the basic facts. That's done. The tutorials, the actual teaching of the basic information is done. So the teacher can focus on the time on the things more at this end of the spectrum.
Yeah. I mean, do you find, James, and I'm sorry to put you slightly on the spot with this question, but do you find that students are asking different questions to you? Do you find them any more intrigued or in desire of searching out information?
100%. And there's some students that really sort of challenge your sort of knowledge and understanding, in fact, because we're looking at muscle stimulation and how muscles actually contract, and they're talking about action potentials, and they're wanting the context behind it, and it's stuff they don't actually need to know, or some of the stuff they don't need to know for the exam, but they're actually interested, intrigued, or wanting to get more information out. So it's good to have those conversations again, and you're saying, well, this is stuff that you perhaps might learn if you're doing biology or if you're doing a sports science degree at university, but they want those sort of answers, and it's good because it keeps me on my toes. But again, you have those conversations with those individuals, and it's not just we're learning this content because we have to. It's well, actually, hold on a minute. You say about all or none law, but there's times where you feel like and they're talking about own experiences, and they're wanting a little bit more than just the textbook as such.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
What you've touched upon is a really that's a really interesting point, because we get a lot of people come to us and say, because we try to aim the tutorials and the quizzes at just above the level of the spec, for exactly that reason, because we understand, and as you've just said, that the model allows the students to go just beyond the level of the spec, and way beyond if they wanted, but it allows them just to happen upon those bits which are beyond their specification. And we kind of think, well, in a traditional model, it's not fair to ask that of students to go beyond that, because there's only a certain amount of time, and they've only got they've got that limited amount of time to learn X amount of content. When you free up the time, what's stopping them from learning that thing? Now, some would argue it's some sort of innate ceiling on their learning.
At that age, you didn't.
Yeah, that age they can only go up to GCSE level.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if anyone's actually wording it like that, but there's this kind of impression that if it is some sort of innate level of intelligence, then we can only give students a certain level of work that matches their target grade or whatever feedback we've had from some sort of test they've done. But all they need is the time and the concentration to sit down and learn something, and they can do it. So it's a really nice point to hear it from you guys that the students are doing that. They are going that little bit past the specification, and maybe just because they want to, because it's like, oh, that's interesting, and the resources are there.
And miles past because they go home and choose to study it because they're intrigued. Imagine. I'm going to say something that might verge on controversial, shock, but for me, I get very concerned about the phrase, which we hear it a lot, which is that which they don't need to learn. That is, I mean, for someone else to judge, for any other human being, for James to judge that Mike doesn't need to learn X, Y, or Z is absolute madness. Now, we might use a phrase such as, this won't be examined, but it's super cool. Now, that's a great educator's phrase. It's given the context to the students so they understand that it's not going to be on that particular exam, but it's given them the license and the opportunity and the freedom to go and be a true autodidact and learner. And that for me, I understand the context of people in the teaching profession feeling like they only need to teach them what they need to learn. Exam boards literally tell teachers that that's what they should be doing as performance. And of course, we've got a professional responsibility to be very directed towards that which is going to matter long term for the student, which is the qualification, of course. But I feel really strongly about that one, and I find it really encouraging to hear you talking about it like that, James.
Yeah, no, I actually quite like it when the students want to know that little bit extra rather than just, the sort of stuff that's going to get them through the exam. And obviously, as educators, as teachers, the idea is that we can, maybe inspire them to go on to do something sports related. Lots of the students, I think there's about 12 out of the 40 actually do PE and biology. So for some of them, this is like right up their street with the physiology content. So it's good to have those conversations one to one or as little groups.
Yeah.
Just
To
out of,
say, well, I find this really interesting that muscle contraction can't take place without calcium ions.
Yeah.
And they're going, whoa, yeah, mind blown.
yeah. And do you find it, James, just out of interest about those students doing biology and PE? Is there a difference? Do they say like something along the lines of, "Oh, we had to learn that for biology, but that's not in PE"? Do you find them comparing the two subjects, the content of the two subjects, and is there a difference between them?
I haven't just yet, if I'm honest, but I think that's something that will probably happen down the line. I don't know where they've started in terms of their biology, but I can imagine later in the year we'll be comparing and contrasting. So we've done this to a certain level, but actually, we've gone a bit further by relating it to sport and examples. We learn a little bit more from my PE exam tutorial. So it's interesting to see what happens with that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna butt in here, guys. Sorry, because we've had a couple of interesting comments on direct messenger on Twitter, so I'll just mention them. I'm not going to put them on the screen because my first response included a swear word back to someone I know reasonably well. So I just wanted to I'll read this out to you. So it's from Julie McKenzie, who's someone I've worked with Julian for must be nearly 10 years. We worked together, not in the same department, but we spent quite a bit of time together. Real nice guy. Played a bit of sport together as well. He's living up in the islands of the wilds of Scotland these days, but doing really well as well.
Warm up there.
He's offered two comments first of all. So he's offered this one, which is I'm watching and I'm not bored.
Okay, good.
Just enjoying the tech. Just enjoying the tech in action, because Julian's his background is in music technology, and he helped me a great deal in selecting this equipment as well, which is really kind of him. And then he said, shame about the shirt, must have been a gift. And I don't know if he's talking about me or you there, Mike. I think it's probably Mike. I'm going to assume that. But
it wasn't a gift, it was a dare.
Well, I'm happy in it. And then he also said, really interesting to hear James's views in the current Ofsted climate and how it is self-evaluating. Yeah. And I think I agree with Julian about that. What you're doing there, that's self-evaluation within the structure that you've got within your lesson. And I think it's twofold, that self-evaluation. It's self-evaluation from the perspective of the teacher, who's able to reflect and evaluate what's going on because there's that constant flow of the volatile data. But it's also self-evaluative from the perspective of the student, who is constantly making reference to razor-sharp targets, and they know all the time where they are and where they're working towards in a slightly bigger picture than just what's the learning objective for today. And I think that's really exciting.
That's massive, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, I mean, so a bit of a compliment there for you, James. I think.
I like it.
Yeah. So
you mentioned as well, James, about obviously when students do come to you with that question that's maybe above the level of what traditionally would be taught in that lesson, how do you cope with that? How do you? You're a bright lad, but how do you cope with those challenging questions, or the question that you wouldn't normally have put on the PowerPoint?
Yeah, generally I've managed to cope, just about. And I imagine if there were something which I wasn't actually too sure of, and I was sort of preempting that you might have asked this actually. I was thinking, well, it's a really good way, to add to their target sheet. Obviously, it's not going to be a core target. It's going to be like a top up or an extension target or something they could set themselves. Go away and find out about action potentials and resting potentials and those sorts of things. They can go away and even if they've got 5 minutes in the lesson, because it's self-paced and some of these more able students flying through some of their targets, then there's no reason why they can't use the lessons there, and the knowledge and put it into even more context.
That changes the relationship, doesn't it, between the teacher and the student, from the teacher being the all-knowing one, the leader, the person at the front who's distributing the information, to a person who's next to you who is human, who doesn't know all the answers, who is going to have the conversation with you, and you're going to learn something together. I mean, and I think that's the thing that when I came to your classroom was the thing that I couldn't put my finger on. You know, it was that thing that everyone is just moving through this thing together, as opposed to it being led by you from the front.
Yeah,
it was really nice.
And I think as well, if I may interrupt here, one of the things that I think for me is really important to say, because I'm probably, even though I'm not doing much right now, but I'm probably the most experienced in this model. You've got to become comfortable at not knowing. The true job of the educator, the true educator, their real job is to be redundant, is to give of themselves everything that they can, so that when those learners, those students, when they move on or when they move beyond, that there's nothing else that they could have extracted or taken from you. And a symptom of that reality is the fact that they are going to go to you, well, what about this, James? What about this, Mike? And you're not going to know, because they've literally done that. So I take that as a massive positive sign. If it's something fundamental, then obviously we need to. That's an issue of training and CPD. But assuming it's not, I see that as a symptom of brilliance, actually.
Yeah.
So I think you should be really confident. And James, I'm sure you're doing this anyway. But I would say to you as well, is don't for a second be afraid to say I don't know. There's nothing wrong. I think it's one of the great symbols that young people can see in their educators. And if I went a touch further, I made a mistake there and put on the wrong screen. Excuse me. Let me come back. So I've now labelled James twice as the wrong person. But what I was gonna, I sort of lost my trail of thought there a little bit. But yeah. Anyway, I've completely lost my trail of thought. But never mind.
It's nice, isn't it? If you're the teacher and there's that question that, like you say, is beyond what you maybe should know, because if it's a basic GCSE level question, you're not sure of the answer, maybe there's an issue. But if it's that challenging question and you think, actually, I don't know the answer to that, that's a really nice opportunity to role model to the students, isn't it? Like, what do you do when you're stuck? What do you do? How do you find out that information? My old head teacher used to say, do the students know what to do when they don't know what to do? And I was like, how many opportunities are there in a normal traditional classroom to role model that, and for students to experience that thing of, right, what do I do now? I've solved this problem by myself. What do I do? How do I find this thing out? And as the teacher, if you can model that, I think it's really powerful.
I totally agree. Yeah.
I find it quite interesting.
Yeah, you're showing yourself to be a brilliant learner.
Yeah.
What
better thing to role model?
Yeah, and interestingly, if I may hog slightly more here, one of the things I always hold that Sal Khan said is that when he was talking about his children, who at that time were just about to go to school, at that point in his model, he literally built a school for his children to go to in Los Altos in California. Have a look at it if anyone's interested. And he said, my aim is not for my children to be great students or learners, it's for them to be great teachers, and the classroom should facilitate that. And I thought that was a really, really interesting thing as well.
Yeah, I find it quite interesting when this was from a discussion on the Facebook group that I think might have been Hef was saying about she was considering setting herself targets, or if there was something that a student asked and she wasn't too sure, she would set herself a little target to learn that. And again, it's that modelling of we're all learning, and this is if I don't know, I'm going to go find out that answer. So
and also Amy Anderson on there, who we're desperately trying to get on. We'll convince her at some point. She said that she is a student in her own classroom.
I'm struggling with.
It's great.
I find myself to be quite far out, but I have to see that.
I really want to see it. Really want to get her on and talk about it, because I mean that's the ultimate role modeling of how to be a good student, to just be a student in your own class.
Just repeat that, Mike. Where did she put that? Is it on the
it's
Facebook
on the Facebook
page
somewhere?
If you describe it, I'm going to see if I can find it and see how she described it, because I remember reading it thinking that is unreal. I mean,
well, I think I can't remember how it came about, but I think she was saying that I may be wrong in saying this. I hope I'm not saying something I shouldn't, but I think she was saying that the new specification is so much that is new that she is going to learn a lot of it alongside the students. So she's going to have this really difficult balancing act of being the student and being the teacher. But while she's doing that, she's going to role model how to be a brilliant student. And I think it could be really great. Like if you've got that student in your class who's I don't know, like they're really, really keen, really just going to do everything. You know, it may be difficult for people to say that if there was a task in the play space that was like a Kagan activity, like you need a fairly confident student to be able to grab a friend or grab 2 or 3 friends and lead that activity in that classroom without any prompting. So if you don't have those types of students that might be outgoing enough or confident enough to do that, she's in the position where she can do that. She can be that student who's leading the way, not just role modeling how to learn, but role modeling how to use the classroom, how to interact with the different activities that are there, and give them permission by showing them how to do it.
I'm actually putting the post on the page at the moment. I'm not sure you're going to be able to see it from your screen, James, but I'll read it out. Yeah, people will be able to see it who are watching this via YouTube. So let me read what it says there. It says from Amy, I'm in a computer room, so they're all sitting in the same place really, and they've all got a large working space. I'm actually working as a student during the lesson too, in a bid to improve my own knowledge. I mean, I think that's an amazing thing. And there's a lot of comments because we all went mad at that. No, I don't mean in a negative way. We were like, wow, that's incredible, you know? So yeah, Mike's saying, wow, that's a hell of a comment, Amy. And again, I want to show this on the screen because I think it begins to show the richness that we have in this group, that this conversation is happening between 18 colleagues who are all experimenting with a model which is, give or take, this, let's say it's the same value system, if not the same structures. And again, you know, it's an amazing thing. I love that about Amy. I'm going to say something else about Amy. I've never actually met Amy, so yeah. I'm looking forward to doing that as well. Amy lives in, she works in Wisbeach, which is a place I frequented a great deal as a young man. And I lived just down the road from there when I was 16 to 18, and a little bit older as well. So I spent a number of night outs in Wisbeach and got to know the local ambiance particularly well. So I at some point I'm looking forward to going over there and revisiting an old haunt. Actually, I have to say. I think that's stunning. And I go back to what I said before, James, is that point for you. If you get that question and your answer is I don't know that yet, I think that's where the teacher's mentality should be. There should be a completely direct, not sure. But
that's a good question. Yeah,
I think it's really empowering for the student to be put on the same level as the teacher. Like we both don't know this together, even though you're the expert and I'm the student. You're the teacher. It's really empowering. I mean, that student should be really motivated, I think, to go away and try and find out that thing that the teacher doesn't know.
Well, we'd be familiar with it in a practical environment. I've had maybe 1 or 2. I was going to say thousands of lessons where there's been a sports performer in the classroom who's better at that activity than me. I mean, I've taught some sports I'm really not that great at. Basketball is a great example. There's numerous times where someone's been way more proficient than me. So it's something that we're comfortable in that environment, but it seems to be for some reason that there's some kind of self-serving bias that doesn't allow us to acknowledge that intellectually. And I find that really interesting. I want to throw something in the mix here. Just sort of, it's interesting. Let's take you've spoken a bit about the A-level, for example, James. And if we think about it in reality, how many colleges and schools are delivering our A-level course and are doing it in specialisms, for example? So Mike does the sociocultural, I do the phys, James does the biomechanics, whatever. But that by definition means that the student knows more than the teacher because they're studying all of it. So it's actually, we might not be talking about it in that moment, but they actually probably do in many, many, many cases. So I think it's something we could probably do a bit better.
There's also in you mentioned earlier, James, about that idea of stepping back when the students are off doing their activities, they're learning on their own, and you step back as the teacher. We're also really comfortable with that as PE teachers, aren't we? Yeah. Set the game up, step back and observe. Set the activity up, step back. So it's kind of in a way feels more comfortable. I wonder if there's anything there that PE teachers may have an advantage over other classroom teachers from that respect, that we're almost comfortable with letting students go and stepping back and observing, and then going in and intervening where we need to. Maybe it feels more comfortable as a PE teacher.
Yeah, and Julian, bless him, he's just offered a couple of little insights into this. I'm just trying to see if my swear words disappeared off the screen so I can screen show this or not. Yeah, well, look, I just called him a cheeky bastard. I don't think it's that bad, really. But that was for the shirt comment. But he's talking about what we're talking about. He's sort of saying leaders of learning. James embodies this, and I agree with that. And he's also saying we're all learning from our students. We're trying to prepare students for a future we cannot imagine. And I think that is a really nice point as well. I hear this trotted out a great deal in the ether of the education conversation. But in this case, why would we limit them? Why would we ceiling them to something which is arbitrary? Because we don't really know what those boundaries are going to be in the future. So releasing that strategically and tactically, I think, is important. I mean, you could even argue it's essential, really, for a true educator's experience.
Maybe
no, 100% agree. I can remember being, at college myself, and the teacher was saying, "You don't need to know this yet." So she taught it, and then towards the end of the year, actually came back to that and said, "Oh, actually, I lied to you before because the energy systems aren't like what I told you before. It's actually a little bit more detailed."
Yeah.
And you almost feel a bit cheated when you're on the receiving end of that.
I know. We talk about example. I've got a number that really annoy me. That there's a few that are classic. Some of them are sort of value system errors. Others are just wrong. We teach it wrong. I mean, sometimes the exam board gets it wrong. I mean, shall I mention which one it is? WJC. Jesus. The stuff that they've put in their GCSEs, Educast and the WJC one for Axes is unbelievable. And again, a colleague contacted me the other day saying, "Look, we'd like you to change the video because it's not a terminology difference; it's wrong.
Yeah.
What they've put in their textbook and things is wrong." So they're literally saying to me, "Would you record a video saying black is white?" No, I'm not doing it. I refuse to do it because it's not reasonable. And then there's other things where I think it's sometimes that we teach it to them one way, and then in the next level we teach it differently. But I think there's other things where the topics like this is a huge broad topic, and we focus on this narrowest part like this, and there's all this richness outside, and often that can be contradictory to what's at the center. The one I love is that notion of diffusion of sports from the middle classes to the working classes in the 19th century, that we diffused our traditions.
It was really friendly.
Yeah, really friendly, and we diffused it through the empire. It was a natural process of almost like molecules moving. So that's another one. They don't talk about the sort of infant mortality rate and the genocide abroad. They don't mention that bit, but we diffuse these things to you. So yeah. Anyway, I'm going off on another monologue. I'll shut up.
And that's why, if I can jump in, I think that's the beauty of the classroom, the environment, that they can access things at their own, at their own time, where they might be able to do worksheet 1 straight away. They might be able to do part of worksheet 2. Might need to go back to the video. Might need to go back to something else before being able to complete everything. So they've got the ability to go to different spaces, different resources, to top up, and then go back to complete it. Rather than, I think you were mentioning before, James, about having that gap in your knowledge, and then you can't ever go beyond that gap.
Yeah,
it's always stuck as a gap. So having access to all those different resources whenever they need it puts the picture together quite well.
One of the things I picked up on the tour was people would go to one area, grab a resource, try and do a resource, and then not be able to finish it for whatever reason, get stuck. And then they would go to a different table and try and find the answer to that problem, go back to the tutorial, watch a little bit more, do a quiz. And they would end up with like bit of paper here, another bit there, and it was all out on the desk. And it was like, right, I've got all this information, I just need to put it together and
learning.
And there was like a literal connecting of the dots.
Yeah.
Literally like taking something from this page and applying it over here. And it was like we aim for that. We aim for this kind of connected learning, but there's no way of doing it because the current model restricts us.
It's almost metaphorical
it really is.
to the connection of the neurons that have not previously been connected. I mean, it's almost literally that, isn't it? I mean, again, and you guys are obviously in a similar vein. For me, it's like obviously, it's like, come on, more of us need to do this. More of us need to switch on to this idea. And I don't even think it's taking a risk anymore, to be honest. I think there's a lot of risk in staying and sticking to what we've been doing. I mean, James, here's an interesting question for you, James, and I genuinely don't know what you're going to say here, so it could backfire on me. How would you feel about going back now? I mean, going back to the other model.
Yeah, in A-level PE, then certainly not. I find that I enjoy the lessons more. I feel like the students enjoy the lessons more. I feel they're genuinely learning more within the lesson time. Whereas previously it might have been, now I'm not saying my lessons were, lecture style and previous lessons weren't, terrible, but you almost feel like it was content. They perhaps weren't actually learning that in the lesson, and it was then going away and actually learning it or recapping the information they've been given. Whereas, within the lesson now, you feel that there's that progress, that learning is actually taking place within that environment, whether it's them completing an exam question, a worksheet, whether it's them teaching someone else or bouncing some ideas off each other. You see that learning taking place more explicitly, I think.
Yeah,
we said, James, when we put this out, that we'd have like about 60%, 6 out of 10 lessons would be in this self-directed, self-paced format, and 4 out of 10 would revert back to not a traditional lesson, but a space where you can have all students together working on some kind of group activity or Kagan, and
a test or a practice,
anything where you want students to do something at the same time. You want to have a class discussion, or you want
that's nice.
And it's nice to change that up. So what sort of percentage have you got of new classroom model compared to you leading a group through a certain activity?
I would say it's very close to that. In fact, the last few weeks, it might have, the ratio might have been slightly higher than that.
Yeah.
But like we said, there's things like initial assessments, topic tests, and just a change in style. The single lessons are occasionally in the sort of EverLearner or the future classroom sort of environment. But those single lessons also lend themselves very well to the topic tests, to doing exam questions and changing the sort of style. Within the next sort of few weeks, I think it'll probably be sort of half and half. And at first, I think I said to you, James, I can't see myself doing 6 out of those 10 lessons based on that sort of format. But in actual fact, I think I'm, right up there in terms of, probably around that sort of 6 to 10, which has taken me by surprise, actually.
That's great.
Cool.
It's really good. So sorry to interrupt. I'm gonna provide a comment here as well from HevTrev, from Heather, who's been actually been commenting both on Facebook and Twitter, actually. But I'll show you this one sheet that she just put in here. She's put, I have 2 colleagues. This is from just a few moments ago, about an hour ago. I have 2 colleagues interested in setting up the classroom, one from maths and one from Spanish. I'm sure that number will grow. Wendy Reynolds, think you have worked with a maths teacher already. Let me know thoughts if possible. So, I mean, that's really encouraging.
Yeah. We're going to try and get Wendy's colleague, maths teacher, on the group, because it'd be nice to have that perspective from a different subject. And Heather, if your colleague is interested in joining, then please put her in touch, because we'd like to have them there.
Yeah, I mean, it almost gets to the point. I mean, and by the way, James, I mean, you're about an hour away from us. I don't know where you. I don't mean to pry here, by the way. And if you don't want to put it on, I understand. I don't know where you live in terms of the south coast. Where are you? Southampton?
Yeah, I'm based in Eastleigh. Yeah,
in Eastleigh, okay. Because one of the things I would definitely encourage you to consider. I mean, this is not something we do whimsically, because it involves time, and we've got to think that through. But one of the things. Little notification. But we'd actually quite like you to come up into the studio and come and talk to us in person about this, so we can literally discuss it together. I mean, we could bring down sort of the studio to you, but sort of upload bitrate speed and all this can be, if you don't know what you're going to be when you get there, it might not be the easiest thing to do. And it's the same with I don't know whether it's called HevTrev or not.
Maybe
with HevTrev. We'd really like to potentially. I mean, she's about an hour and 15 minutes down the M4. Well, if you go that way from here. So potentially we've got these people near enough that on a particular day they could come in, and I think it could be really nice. And Wendy's much closer. I mean, Wendy's in Ascot, so she's about 25 minutes away. So there's some real possibilities there. Yeah. And HevTrev was saying here, it's great, James. Bedwell, I'm really enjoying listening to your experiences. So nice comments as well coming in from Hev Trevor, and I think it kind of summarises the experience of what we've got here. We've got a lot of really high quality people having really high quality conversations.
Yeah, it's great.
And one of the targets I've set myself is to actually invite, like some of the other guys have done in the group, to invite some of the teaching and learning group into experience the lesson. We've got a few guys that have sort of experienced I did a little inset session on the future classroom. That was at the end of last year after going to the CPD session in Worthing. And lots of the guys were saying, well, I'd love to see that, in practice. So it's now before Christmas. The target is to get three members of the teaching and learning group in to experience it. I think they'd love it.
Yeah, cool.
And I'm gonna sort of give another comment that Julian's very kindly made here as well, and that comment I'll read it out to you. It's he's put on here. So the significant process and change agent is the collegiate discussion. James, Mike, Hev, Trev, Julian, that's us, us discussing this, bringing the conversation to people. We're not perfect. I used the word cheeky bastard on the thing earlier. Very nearly brought a couple of bottles of beer in here to have a little drink on a Friday while we do. Why not? Why can't we do that? We're adults, not breaking any laws. But by elevating this conversation, I think we're really potentially engaging people here. And he said here, so impressed with the synergy of the technology. Well done, you chaps. Well, I have to say, I really appreciate you saying that, Julian. I mean, for me personally, there's loads of things I'm really not happy with the technology, that I've pressed the wrong button, I've put the wrong name tab open, this sort of thing. But we'll get better. we'll get better at that. But that's just details, just really. Stuff. What's important is the conversation that we're all having. And I have to say, on a personal level, I'm so proud of that. Life's hard right now at the moment. We're working an ungodly number of hours to try and bring to everyone what we want to bring to everyone at the end of January. It's better not described really, that experience, but I'm really proud of this conversation. I'm really proud of James for attempting this and running with this, because we're not doing it, he's doing it, and I'm really proud of the fact that we come out on a Friday evening and actually put this thing out live as well and put time into it, and I think people will value that too. So I think it's tremendous, but I am aware of people's time, so I just want to be a little bit sensible. Are there points people haven't made that they'd like to?
There's one point I'd like to finish on, sure. if I can go before you, James. Is we first kind of put the Pioneers group together and we invited you to it, got you to fill out like a little questionnaire, and one of the comments you made, and you've made it to me in person as well, is that I'll read it to you. It says, I find I have to tell students off in lessons where this approach isn't used. So in those lessons where in the traditional lesson you're finding you're telling students off more, if that's the right term. So just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, we had that discussion, didn't we? And yeah. I think we're saying that there's no sort of coincidence about it. Like I said, the number one piece of feedback that we got from those teachers in the learning walk yesterday was the fact that the engagement levels were so high. They're enjoying what they do, so they don't need to mess around. They've got no opportunity to mess around, and they don't want to mess around. Whereas, in that other sort of classroom where they're, in maybe the tables are in straight lines or whatever, and they're bored of my voice, and they haven't got much input, or they want to say something, they want to ask a question, they don't have that chance. It's going to lead to them, throwing pens and just not engaging in the lesson, that sort of thing. So, like we said, I don't think it's a coincidence between the classroom and the behaviour management. I think it sorts itself out, really.
Yeah, and I think for me, what's interesting about that is, again, what are we saying? And I don't mean to undermine your role in that, James. Which you're also doing something really good as well. So let's acknowledge that. But what you're saying there, I think, is that the model produces this, and the teacher just facilitates this model and encourages this model to move as smoothly and efficiently as they can. And I think if we could wrap that model up and provide it to more people in an immediate term, I think we've really got something here. Is our model of Education Reimagined perfect right now? No, there's things that even now I think we'll tweak that when we republish, and we're going to change it slightly. And what about this other influence that might come in? So we'll keep pushing that. But to hear you talk about this, James, I mean, I don't want to get all gushing, but Yeah, no, I mean, for me personally, you got to remember something, James. You got to remember something that's really. This is only Simsy speaking here, but you got to remember that 2 years ago I was a lunatic at a dining room table, trying to produce this stuff. Trying to convince people of this, trying to speak to every teacher I could on the phone individually and tell them that it was possible, and that wasn't, so. Okay, someone might say, well, we've only got 18 people doing it now. To me, 18's like a huge society. It's like a mass of people compared to where we were. Well, not even 6 months ago. There were 2 people doing it 6 months ago. So where will we be in a year's time? Where will we be when the EverLearner's launched in January? I'm really enthused by this conversation, and I'm really happy. So, cool. Final comments, folks.
Yeah, that's everything from me. James, you got anything else you want to say?
No, I think that the last point I was going to make, and it's quite a funny comment. So I gave a questionnaire to some of the students to fill out and give me some feedback about their experiences within AWP already. And some of the comments which were quite funny were, what does James actually do?
What was that? What was that, James? Say that again.
So a student sort of pinpointed and said, what does James actually do? Which made me laugh because they always come from other lessons where the teacher stands at the front and will talk for the whole lesson, or perhaps there's not that independence, and they sort of think, well, no, James floats around the room, he speaks to us. I found it quite an interesting and quite a funny comment that students are saying, it's almost like an easy lesson for James.
Yeah,
it's kind of like what's wrong with that?
It's like what Heather said. The first thing she said was she feels redundant in the classroom.
Yeah. Exactly. It's almost a bit like that, but the students are sort of recognising it now. It's quite funny to hear that sort of feedback, because they're obviously used to teachers stood at the front, and a teacher has to tell you the answer. A teacher has to tell you to go through the next slide, or a teacher tells you the answer to the mark scheme. So I found that quite that tickled me a little bit.
It kind of makes me think, actually. My daughter is now coming up for 8 months.
And she's great as well.
Yeah, she's cool. And she like, when you pick her up, she's always like, maybe it's just a reflection on me, but she's always like trying to get away. She's like, no. And she has started to crawl this week. So now she's like independent, she's off on her own. She's like, now she's trying to stand up. So it's kind of like that sort of thing. Like, no, I don't need you anymore. I'm just doing it by myself. It's that sort of mentality. It's nice. It's obviously not the same driver, but it's kind of, it's a nice thing to think is happening.
Yeah. No, I agree, and she's super cute, by the way. I won't say her name in case it's sensitive. But,
I don't mind. I think she's been on video.
Oh, of course, yes, yeah. But she's a great kid as well. It does annoy me a bit that you guys are doing it so well. But I don't think it is a different driver. I think it is broadly the same driver. I think what we see a lot in let's call it education broadly. I see a lot of the time where education is applied to students. It's done to students. Students both, and they participate in it sometimes, and they endure it often. And I think what we're talking about here, whereas the education sits entirely with the student, but around them they've got magnificent support, magnificent availability of brilliant people, brilliant resources. They've got flexibility of time, and they've got rigorous standards. And when you put that in the environment, then of course it's going to be very, very difficult. You're going to have to choose to fail, actually. You're going to have to choose, or you're going to have something going on that's not, I don't mean intellectually, I mean personally, emotionally, that's going to prevent that. We all know there's horror stories where something awful happens and a young person just can't at that moment for whatever, we all know what those things are. But generally speaking, if we take the general run of things, success becomes almost inevitable in that environment. Yes, we've got to guide it. Yes, we've got to make sure it's focused on the qualification structures. But the model is so rich. And I reread something that I wrote not too long ago in that master plan post, and it's that this model has to outperform the current model by every variable. And I think that we've represented that really neatly this afternoon, actually, this evening, I should say. Yeah. So
that's an interesting thought. In fact, I'll just jump in very quickly.
Feel free. By the way, I'm fine for time personally. The only reason I'm rushing is because young Mike over here's got to drive. So that for me,
No, it's fine.
I've got to pick my girls up from dance literally around the corner in about half an hour. So I'm absolutely fine. There's no problem with me.
Talk about it all night.
Yeah. Sorry, James, go ahead.
Glenn made the point. He said, "No, I think it's fantastic you're giving this a go." And he said, we as a department have fantastic results already, A level, and there's people that are saying, well, why would you actually do that? Why would you change it if it doesn't need fixing, sort of thing? So, obviously, Glenn sees the value in it. I see the value in it, and we're thinking that it is going to outperform the old way in terms of results, because the kids are getting that sort of experience, that learning environment. So we could have stuck with the original or traditional sort of way of delivering. We've got really good results in the past, but we as a department really buy into it. So I think that speaks volumes of the kids' classroom as well.
Yeah, and I think for me as well, the bravery to ask what is success, because success is A's, B's, C's, 9s, 8s, 7s. It is that stuff. But success is, you can't always touch on success. And James, I'm really confident you'll have this in your classroom as well. But it's also the fact that a young person truly develops and becomes inspired by you. Education has been rendered down in many ways in recent years to what can be fit into a spreadsheet. But I promise every teacher out there, I guarantee it, that education is way more than that. Education is something which you often don't even know that you did with somebody. You don't even know until 10 years later when you bump into them and they say, I really remember that thing that you said, or it could even be you had a word with me that day and you were right. You don't know what it is. And I think what this classroom does, it enables those possibilities. Let's loosely call it for inspiring people, though that's so overused that term, but you know what I mean. I think this model as well, it really lifts the potential for those kinds of experiences. One of the things I love about it as well is you just get to know them better.
Yes, nice.
One of the reasons I became a teacher is I like teenagers, and in the most respectful way possible. I like being in the environment with young, vibrant people. So it gives you the opportunity for that as well.
Yeah, I agree. I'd have to say I learned their names within just under 2 weeks. All of the sort of 40 students within both groups. And I'm pretty good with names. I've got that reputation in the department because I'm slightly younger, let's say. But
is that Glenn you're talking about again?
Because you have those discussions, you get to know them much quicker, and you build that rapport with them. So yeah, 100% agree with that.
And it goes back to that point James made earlier about if a student does have something going on at home, one of those things that is going to disrupt the way they're able to learn, then you can pick up on that much more because you do know them better, and they're going to feel more comfortable with you. So that whole other side of the school environment, it becomes much more natural, much more part of every teacher's role to look after the students, rather than left to some sort of department as a pastoral team, or it's your job to make sure they're able to learn and then send them to me. Yeah,
I agree. I think it's nicely summarized by saying, in this model, the teachers and the learners are on the same team. Yeah, and I think that really gives the feel and the air of what this is ultimately all about. Everyone's working towards the same thing and supporting each other, pushing towards that goal. Whereas I think often what I found as a teacher was that I was either dragging them towards it, or I was having to be the person that disciplined them towards it, and that's a different model altogether. I'm not saying it can't work, but I just think it's a different model. But I do again want to say something else, that what you said there is very important, James. Itchen does have very good results in PE, as I understand it. Some of the best results in Itchen are in PE and sport, I think, if I remember correctly. And
that's right.
It's absolutely essential that this model does know it has that rule of zero collateral damage. It must take all people at least to that level of qualification that they would have got in the other model, and let's say with confidence beyond that as well. So it's very important we're saying that this is not some kind of crazy free-for-all. We are strategically thinking about that as well. But yeah, I don't know. I'm really enthused. Really enthused.
Yeah.
Final comments, folks. Well, Mike, you go first, then we'll give the last word to James.
I was going to touch on just something you said earlier about the only thing that matters is the learning of the student, and I agree to a point, but I also think there's something missing quite a lot, which is just student happiness.
Yeah.
Like just allowing students to enjoy their time in school with their friends, with teachers who care about them, and just like being there. And I think there's quite a lot of not having that feeling around schools. There's lots of schools which do a great job. So it's easy to sit here and criticize, but I think there's a lot of students who are somewhat unhappy.
Yeah.
Because they feel that kind of factory model. They feel it's a little bit like they're shifted
from colonial model.
They're shifted from pillar to post to just have stuff done to them, and then they go home where they can relax and enjoy time with family or friends. Like they have to go home to enjoy the time with their friends, which they've spent time with the friends all day, but for some reason they're not enjoying it as much. Now, clearly, if they're just going home and doing a hobby, it's going to be potentially more enjoyable than being in school. But the school experience, that experience of learning something, being that student we said earlier who's going to go, I've asked that question, the teacher doesn't know, I'm going to go and find that out. Like, it's a real feel-good factor. And I think quite often it's missing in schools, that it's overlooked that actually student happiness is quite important.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I think it comes maybe from that idea that we're preparing students for life. Like their life actually starts at 18. Once we've done everything we need to do to them, we've fixed them up, and now we're going to release them at 18, and then they can go and do what they like and be happy. So, well, actually, those first 18 years are kind of important, that they're happy and they're content. So I wonder, my impression about this model is that students can be happier.
It'd almost be
sorry,
look at well, just on a side note, to look at attendance of those students that are in that sort of model compared to students. It'd be interesting to get an insight into attendance, because obviously if they're enjoying it in that environment, then obviously those attendances will probably be higher. That's just something to note on the side as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point.
You mentioned
actually.
retention quite a lot, James.
But for me, nobody's going to agree with me on this one, because I don't know. Just people don't agree with me, but I can't help it. By far the most important data figure I ever had when I was working both as a classroom teacher, head department, and later as on SLT as assistant principal was retention. Because for me, that's where my educator role started. My job was to keep these people, I use a term that James used a lot, engaged and activated in the experiences that they've chosen, or to some degree have chosen. So for me, retention was always the key figure I looked at. Now, in the early stage of, let's call it my sort of examination PE classes, that led to some problems, because that desire to have that meant that what in most other courses would be kind of sidelining kids and grooming data, I wasn't doing that. But I think in this model, what we're saying is that if you see an increase in retention, which is what happened with me, it depends on the course you're at. GCSE courses, generally people don't slide away from those too often. But if your retention goes up simultaneously with, let's call them in the broader sense, attainment targets going up, if you get that, then you've got something extremely rich, because there are countless examples of brilliant attainment results out there in a department or by a teacher or whatever, and the retention is way, way down here. Now, I don't value that particularly highly. So one of the things I liked about this model when I started using it was that the retention rose really dramatically, actually, given the small percentages you're talking about, and then you get the attainment progress as well. So if you've got numbers growing, which is hard in PE, you've got retention going up, and you've got attainment going up as well. That's genuine improvement. That's not managed improvement. That's real improvement. Yeah. But
no, I can see that. Yeah.
So I mean, you have to. That's just my personal thing on retention. I mean, I say not everyone will agree with that. I mean, your line managers are probably going to be more into. They're probably, many line managers will manage retention to get attainment. For me, I'm willing to risk attainment to get retention.
Yeah.
Right. So
cool.
Gentlemen, it's been an all male event. We've had no Marta in with us. We have to get Marta on one of these. I think she's got our languages teacher Marta. She has a really interesting perspective on all of this, because she comes at this obviously from a different perspective than we have as both all of us male, all of us PE teachers. Of course, she comes at it from a different perspective. Also, for her, she was brought up in Catalonia, and she. Yeah, I wasn't sure whether to. Anyway, Yeah, just so everyone's clear, I had my fist closed there. Everyone knows that, don't they? She comes in from a different perspective because she sees different values and different possibilities in this model, and I think we should probably incorporate her more into these conversations because she's also a very analytical person. She asks very good questions.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see. But James, I just want to say a massive thank you to you, sir. Really, I mean, huge.
No, thanks for having me.
And thanks to your team, James, as well, because you're one of the groups we work really closely with, and it's really valuable. Every time I come down there, I really enjoy my time there. So it's valued.
I'm going to say that Glenn. I mean, I know Glenn well. Glenn Colmer. Glenn and I have known each other for 15 years, something like that. We were young teachers at Itchen. He was at Itchen. I was at Farmer Sixth Form. Countless fixtures, played cup finals, we've played league deciders against each other, we've not been able to speak to each other for a few days afterwards, things like that, you know. But he's a bit of a hero of mine, and one of the things I think we have to acknowledge here is that James and us are having this conversation because Glenn has facilitated that conversation, not through he's changed his classroom, or I don't as you know how he's doing it, but he's encouraging this, and I cannot endorse managers' behaviour more than that. That they've allowed or opened the door for, can I call you young James, for a young tenacious teacher to go and strive for what they believe in. I think I take my hat off to Glenn. There's a lot of managers that wouldn't, and Andy's another one as well, and Dan Itchen as well. I'm sure there's others, but I mean that the fact that you're getting support and encouragement for that, I think is very important that we acknowledge that. So do please share that with them.
Yeah, no, everyone believes in the model, and everyone's huge supporters of the my exam, the future classroom, and all that. So we're all massive fans, and the roadmaps, for example, being used in BTEC lessons, A-level lessons,
cool.
Level 2 lessons, Level 3. So we're huge fans. We're hopefully reaping the rewards from that.
Well, that's really kind of you. And Mike, do you want to? I'm gonna get us ready to sign off. Do you want to sort of sign us off with a bit of a close?
Put me on the spot. You want some sort of like motivational?
No,
just some squat thrusts will do this bit, please, Mike.
Like I said, James, it's always a pleasure coming down to Itchen, and we've got a vague plan to do some work on a biomechanics unit, I think, coming up together, using some of the resources we've prepared for that. So you're going to let me know when you're ready for that, and then we'll come down and maybe do a little research project or some action research or something. So I'm excited about that, and mate, thanks very much. It's an absolute pleasure. As always.
Awesome, James. Well done, mate, and keep it up and keep talking to us. Don't hesitate to ask questions and get in touch.
Cheers, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, and just stay on the line just 1 second, James, as we close stream. Everyone who's either watched this live or on demand, many thanks. We truly appreciate it. Thanks a lot. All the best.